Welcome to our deep dive today. We're diving into the world of English again, and we've got a really interesting bunch of words and phrases today, from those sayings we hear every day to some slang that's just wonderfully strange, and some words that you'll actually find really useful.
And it really is a journey into how we use language because it's so much more than just, getting information across, right? It's all tied up with our culture and history, even our sense of humor.
Right, like a window into how English speakers see the world, huh?
Exactly.
So let's just jump right in. What about this phrase, "roll with the punches"? I mean, it's about dealing with stuff, but it's a bit more than that, isn't it? What's the real meaning there?
Yeah, it's a particular kind of resilience, being adaptable when things get tough, not being rigid when things go wrong, but adjusting your approach to kind of soften the blow.
Not letting it knock you down completely.
Exactly. It's strategic, it's a kind of yielding, but not giving up, right? And
Yeah.
this idea that, flexibility is strength, that's pretty common in many English-speaking cultures.
And it comes from boxing, right?
Yes.
So how did that happen?
Well, in boxing, if a fighter sees a punch coming and they move with it, they actually absorb less of the impact. So the idiom takes that physical technique and applies it to life's challenges.
Instead of just getting flattened by a problem at work, you got to be flexible and find another way, right?
Yeah, yeah. Keep moving forward.
Like the example we have here. After losing his job, Mark learned to roll with the punches and started his own business. He didn't pretend it didn't happen. He used it to push himself in a new direction.
Absolutely. And I think, if you think about times in your own life when you've had to adapt, unexpectedly, it helps the phrase make more sense. It's about realizing that challenges are going to happen, and it's how we react, our ability to roll, that really makes the difference. And it also ties into that whole stiff upper lip
Oh,
thing,
yeah.
especially in British culture, that quiet determination to keep going, like hang in there,
Yeah.
or go with the flow.
Right. Accepting change.
Hmm.
Okay, well let's move on to something completely different. This word grotty. It just sounds so British.
Oh, it is. Grotty is fantastic British slang, and it means something's unpleasant, unattractive, just generally low quality. It's more than just dirty. There's this implication of shabbiness and just being unappealing. And slang like this, it becomes like a shortcut, you
Right.
know,
Right.
a shared understanding between people.
And it feels like it has a 60s vibe. I think the Beatles were mentioned in our notes.
Yeah. Grotty became really popular during the British invasion in the 1960s. And, it's quite likely that someone like George Harrison using it, in A Hard Day's Night, that probably helped make it more mainstream. It fit with that whole shift away from formality, towards a more casual, almost rebellious way of speaking.
So if like a restaurant's a real letdown, you could just say it's grotty and that says it all.
Exactly. The hotel room was so grotty that we decided to check out early. It wasn't just messy, it was fundamentally unpleasant, right?
Maybe it's a very negative word. Our source suggests linking it to grotesque. Does that work?
I think it does. While grotesque is a much stronger and more formal word, they both have that sense of something being truly unpleasant. So associating grotty with that stronger feeling can help you remember it. And you're right, there are other words that kind of fit in that same area, like shabby or dismal or grungy. But grotty is right there in the middle of all that unpleasantness.
Okay, well, from unpleasant to maybe a bit more confrontational. Back
Yeah.
down. It seems simple, but is there more to it?
Yeah, there are subtleties to it. So the basic meaning is retreating, from a position or an argument. But back down often implies that it's not completely voluntary. There's a feeling of pressure or opposition. Maybe the realization that sticking to your guns just won't work. It's more about yielding than changing your mind.
So it's not just, oh, you know what, I've thought about it and I've changed my mind.
Right, right.
It's a bit more reluctant.
Yeah, it's conceding often in the face of conflict, an argument, a negotiation, and one side feels like they have to withdraw what they were saying.
Like in our example, the company had to back down from its tough stance after receiving numerous complaints from customers. They were forced to change.
Exactly. Right.
So how can we really grasp this phrase?
I think visualizing it helps.
Yeah.
Picture someone literally stepping back, like they're retreating from a fight. And there's some good synonyms too, like withdraw or yield or capitulate. Capitulate being the most formal, like a complete surrender.
Okay, from backing down to something a little more uh, abstract,
Right.
hypothetical. We use this a lot in discussions, when we're exploring different possibilities.
Yeah, hypothetical is key for abstract thinking. It lets us consider things that aren't real, explore those possibilities, have those theoretical discussions. It's essential in science and philosophy, even in strategic planning.
It's an academic word, right? Like you'd hear it in a university lecture.
Definitely. It's the language of what if. And when we say something is hypothetical, we're saying it's imagination or theory, not necessarily reality.
Like our example. In a hypothetical world where everyone is honest, how would society function differently?
Yeah, that's a thought experiment.
Right.
Exploring what might happen based on an imagined premise. And being able to think abstractly like that, using words like hypothetical, that's crucial for innovation and problem solving.
And thinking of the word hypothesis can help us remember what hypothetical means.
Exactly. They come from the same root, and they both relate to ideas that haven't been proven or might not even be true. A hypothesis is a suggested explanation. It's a hypothetical scenario that you're putting forward to test. And words like speculative or theoretical or conjectural, they all have that sense of being based on assumption, not hard facts.
Okay, that connection makes it really clear. Now, let's talk about something a bit more, well, down to earth, something we all do. Spending money. Shell out. This sounds like it has a story behind it.
It does. It's a phrasal verb, and it means to spend money, but often reluctantly or because you have to. It feels like the money is being pulled out of you.
Like taking a pea out of its pod or a nut from its shell.
Yeah, that's a great way to think about it. And the origin goes back to the 1800s, and shell was used figuratively to mean giving something up.
Hmm.
So, you have to crack open the shell to get to the valuable thing inside, your money, and then you have to give it away.
Like our example, after the unexpected car repair, I had to shell out a considerable amount of money for my savings.
Yeah, it really captures that feeling of parting with something valuable because you have to.
What are some good ways to remember this phrase?
Well, that analogy, that nutshelling analogy, that's very powerful. Picture yourself really carefully getting that nut out and then having to hand it over. And there's some good synonyms too, like pay out or fork out.
Fork out. That sounds painful.
Right. And then there are more formal ones like disperse and expend.
Hmm.
But the informal ones, they really capture that reluctance, that sense of, ugh, I don't want to do this.
Okay, our next word sounds like like a commotion itself. Brouhaha. What can you tell us about this one?
Brouhaha is a fantastic word for describing noisy excitement, a commotion, maybe even a small scandal. It's a situation where there's a lot of fuss, a lot of public attention, often because of something controversial or unexpected. And it's more than just noise. There's this feeling that something important is causing all the stir, even if it's not really that important.
It's like uproar, like commotion, but with a bit more drama to it. And it has interesting origins, doesn't it?
It does. It's thought to come from a French expression that originally meant bewilderment or surprise, almost like a confused exclamation. And then it came into English in the late 1800s, and its meaning changed to include any kind of noisy, often public disturbance. And it's a great word because it sounds like what it means.
Right, like our example, the unexpected announcement of the merger created quite a brouhaha among the employees. You can just picture everyone talking, maybe arguing, all at once.
Exactly. A burst of noise and excitement, maybe even over the top for the situation. And there are some good synonyms too, ruckus, hullabaloo.
Oh, hullabaloo. That's another good one.
Right. And then uproar and commotion, they all capture that sense of a big public disturbance.
All right, from brouhaha to stopping problems before they really start. Nip in the bud. That sounds pretty proactive.
It is. Nip in the bud means to stop a problem, or something undesirable very early on before it has a chance to grow and become something bigger. It's all about addressing it when it's small and preventing it from becoming serious.
It's like gardening, right? Pinching off a flower bud before it blooms.
Exactly. The idiom comes directly from horticulture, nipping or pinching off buds to redirect the plant's energy or stop unwanted growth. And this has been used metaphorically since the 17th century to describe stopping anything negative before it fully develops.
So you see a problem started, you got to nip it in the bud before it gets out of control.
Exactly.
Like our example, recognizing the signs of a problem early She decided to nip it in the bud before it spiraled out of control.
Yeah, preventing a bigger issue later on.
How can we remember this one?
Well, that image of a gardener carefully pinching off a little rosebud so it never opens, that's a really good one. It's a clear picture of stopping something right at the beginning. And you could use words like curtail or suppress or prevent or hinder. They all have that meaning of stopping something from progressing.
Okay, that image is pretty vivid.
Yeah.
And finally, we come to lurgy. This sounds like something you'd jokingly complain about having.
It does. It's British slang, and it's used in a lighthearted way to talk about a minor illness, usually a cold or a mild flu.
Yeah.
It's the kind of word you use when you're feeling a bit under the weather, but not really sick.
It's not a serious medical term.
No, not at all.
And our notes mention the Goon Show.
Yeah, lurgy became really popular in the 1950s because of that British radio show. They used the lurgy as this recurring fictional illness, this mysterious disease that everyone seemed to catch. And because it was used for comedy, it found its way into everyday language as a funny way to talk about sniffles and aches.
So if someone says they've caught the lurgy, you don't need to worry too much.
Right.
Like our example, I've got the lurgy, so I'll be staying in bed with some hot tea today. Sounds like a typical sick day.
Mm-hmm.
How can we remember this bit of British fun?
Well, picture a silly, maybe cartoonish germ called the lurgy going around causing a bit of trouble. It reminds you that it's not a serious illness.
Mm.
And while there are synonyms like bug or cold or flu or just illness, they don't have that same lightheartedness as lurgy. It's a very British way of making light of being a bit sick.
Well, we've explored a lot today,
Mm.
from being resilient and rolling with the punches to calling a cold the lurgy. It's amazing how much culture is packed into these words and phrases.
It really is. And by understanding them, you get a much deeper appreciation, not just for the language, but for the different ways people use it and the cultures that shape those expressions.
It's more than just knowing what the words mean.
Yeah.
It's understanding all the layers of meaning, the stories behind them.
Mm.
So as you go about your day, think about how these expressions reflect different ways of thinking, of approaching life, of dealing with challenges, even just describing how you feel. How might knowing what nip it in the bud means or understanding what someone means when they say something's grotty, how might that change how you communicate, how you understand what you hear?
And it really makes you think about how language is always changing.
Right.
The phrases we've talked about today, they have their own history, their own reasons for existing. It makes you wonder what new words are appearing right now and what they'll tell future generations about us. It's a fascinating process.
It really is. Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.
See you then.